I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was a member of what was a motorcycle gang called the Lords of Flatbush. One day we were all in trouble, as usual, and I was sent for vocational guidance, and the guidance counselor said to my mother that I should be sent to art school. In my family, that was the last thing you did, was become an artist. You got a job, you worked your way up the corporate ladder, or you became a doctor or a lawyer. There was no way you became an artist, because artists starved and were gay, and my family would have neither of each. My mother finally broke down, and they sent me to the Brooklyn Museum, where I went on Saturdays, and I excelled. And when I graduated high school, I went from black leather in my motorcycle jacket to corduroy, and I went to the School of Visual Arts. And it was there that I had this whole awakening, and the anger that I had when I was growing up in a gang left. All that anger dissipated, and I focused all my attention into making art. From art school, I went into advertising, because that was the only way you could survive in those days. And I ended up becoming the co-creative director of an ad agency, Ogilvy and Mather Advertising. David Ogilvy was the chairman of the board and the copywriter. I was his art director and producer. I was not happy working in an office, and I left. And I started to direct commercials. And I was in London, and I met John Lennon. And through a series of circumstances, he gave me the rights to a song called I Feel Fine. I didn't know it was called I Feel Fine. I thought it was called She Said So, because that was what the chorus was. And it was an animation piece, and it was all stop motion, I should say. And I did all the drawings. John would come over my apartment, and we'd sit and we'd color them in. That became known as the first music video. And I continued doing music videos. The music videos evolved into making the Lords of Flatbush. I had worked with Stallone and Richard Gere. They were my original leads in Lords of Flatbush. Let me backtrack a minute. I wrote the script of Lords. The girl I was living with and I polished it, and then I cast it, and I had Stallone and Richard Gere as my leads, and we worked in my apartment. They did not get along. Sly is very external and Richard's very internal, and we worked for many, many months on this, because I had no money, don't forget. So we rehearsed and we would do improvisations. Some of the best scenes in Lords of Flatbush came from those improvisations that Stallone and Richard Gere did. Because there was friction between them, Richard was let go, and Perry King replaced him. The dialogue that Perry King had to say in the movie was exactly from Richard Gere's mouth. Years later, I was in Russia with Richard and Matt Dillon. And Matt Dillon, it was one of his favorite movies, and they remembered the dialogue. And so here we were in Red Square, where they were actually acting out a scene from my movie. It was really very flattering to see that, to know that they both had such feelings about this film. Sly had this incredible imagination. You could just give him one word and he could go off on it. I should tell you that when I met him, he was in an acting class at Herbert Berghoff Studios. He was not a member of the workshop. John Hirschfeld, the director and writer, was, and who's also a good friend of Sly's. And John was supposed to do a scene, and he said, you know, he was going to do this scene with his friend. And Herbert Berghoff said, well, you have to use people in this class. You just can't use people outside the class. But nobody else was prepared. So serendipity for Stallone, he let him go up on stage. And Stallone ate John Hirschfeld and spit him out. It was like John didn't exist on that stage that day. And I was so impressed, and I offered him this part. When he had finished doing this scene, Herbert and Uta Hagen, who was Herbert Berghoff's wife and great acting teacher, said to Stallone, "Who are you?" And Stallone immediately went and said, "My name is Q Moonblood, and I'm an American Indian, and I live on a reservation north of Miami." And I said, you know, I grew up with these guys. This is not an American Indian. This is an Italian kid from a neighborhood, you know, not a reservation. So anyway, he came back to my apartment, and that's where I learned his real name was Sylvester Stallone. And he stayed with the film, and he was a joy, an absolute joy to work with. Totally focused and totally creative and inspirational. And when you look back and see that he wrote $1 billion worth of movies, became one of the biggest movie stars of all time, I think he deserves it. And I think that the concentration that he had helped greatly. Anyway, so this book I wrote is on the making of the Lords of Flatbush, documents my dealing with the mob, my dealing with the Gills, my dealing with getting the movie made, all the way to when they became successful, and how Gary Marshall had said that Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, and also Welcome Back Kotter were taken from Lords of Flatbush. Henry took his character, Fonzie, from Stallone in Lords of Flatbush. I follow in my book the evolution of all these great actors. I shouldn't say actors because they're more personalities and movie stars, but how they evolved and how the film evolved and how we sold off foreign territories, how the film started to garnish, accolades. If my book on the making of the Lords of Flatbush is successful, perhaps I'll write another book. People ask, what I like to do, what I want to do, etc. And last year I had a show at the Palm Springs Museum, and I came up with this line for that speech that I gave at the Palm Springs Museum, and I said that sometimes I write my pictures, sometimes I photograph my pictures, sometimes I paint my pictures, sometimes I make a movie of my pictures. And I guess in the end, it would say that I was a picture maker.